Well, when they say they don't make them like they used to, here's a perfect example. This old Volvo has over 300,000 miles on it. It still runs pretty good. And I gotta say, the guy got the deal of the century. He bought it for $1,500, and since then, he's put over 200,000 miles on it. Hey, now that's what I call a deal. And of course, it's a station wagon. Hey, people used to love station wagons. As you can see, it is a full-size station wagon. Look at the space you get. Matrix, it's like a squashed down station wagon, right? Well, this baby's full size. You can put an awful lot of crap in these things. Oh, it's a 93. It was made in Sweden. Back in those days, people were actually studying Volvo in the Swedes. They said, how come they have such good quality? And it turns out that it had to do with keeping their workers happy. Guys didn't just sit, go turn, turn, turn. They had different jobs at different times, so they weren't bored out of their minds like most people in an assembly line. Japanese are a little bit different than the Swedish. The Swedish get bored more easily, I guess. Now, as we go under the hood, they generally all pop because they got the old-fashioned springs. You don't need a holder or you don't need any struts. They work for quite some time, too. Costs more money to make them that way, so now they got those cheap little rods to hold them up, or hydraulics that break. This doesn't. Now, this is still the original engine with over 300,000 miles on it. Truthfully, he did have to have the transmission rebuilt. That's 300,000 miles. Okay, so the thing went 300,000 miles, right? You can't complain about that. And that was $2,000. He only paid $1,500 for the car. At 300,000 miles, he put $2,000 in the transmission. That's not a bad deal at all. Well, this guy obviously takes care of his vehicles, and he's not some kind of racing maniac. These are good engines. They're 4-cylinder engines, but back in the day, I had people in Texas. I'd take them for a ride in one, and they'd say, oh, what's under the hood, a V8? I said, no, 4-cylinder. The race jockey guys do burnouts all the time and over-rev them. Yeah, they'll blow head gaskets. This guy obviously is taking care of it, and the proof that it's got over 300,000 miles, still the original engine. It says a lot about how strong these things were built. Now, granted, it's a big vehicle. He said he gets about 20 on the highway. It's an old car. Back in those days, that was seen as decent gas mileage. I mean, hey, he only paid $1,500 for the car, and he's gone 200,000 miles more. Who cares about miles per gallon when you're saving that kind of money? These old Volvos, let me tell you, not only are they solid made, but even an old one like this, they generally don't rust. Look at that. Still solid as can be. Now, understand one thing. These are unibodies. They don't have body on frame, they're unibody. And if you make them so they don't rust, in this case, look how long it's lasted. If you would have gotten a car that didn't have good rust preventative like the Swedes put on, take a Ford, Chrysler, maybe in a junkyard decades ago, it would have rusted away. There wouldn't be anything left. These things, they knew how to build them correctly. The problem that Volvo really had was, a few years after this, they really started to mass produce. Then they had a deal going with GM, and then later they had a deal going with Ford, and now they're owned by the Chinese. The problem was, they went from making a smaller amount of cars really well to starting to mass produce them, and they made a lot of screw-ups on the way when they mass produced them too much. That was the detriment of Volvo. It wasn't that they didn't make good cars. The problem was they made really good small amounts of cars, but when they upped the mass production, it just didn't pan out very well. As we look inside, of course, he's got seat covers on them. The old seats are going to be worn out, yeah, but the seat covers look nice. Now, the back still has the top that's original, but the bottom's got a seat cover. That part wore, but the top didn't. You get this old leather, generally, it's going to crack. And being a station wagon, this is why people bought them. Everything, laundry, groceries. You put those things back. You can put sheetrock in there. Station wagons were always handy. Okay, let's see if it starts right up. There it goes. And as we look inside, the AC is still blowing cold, but he did have to have that worked on. Everybody knows Swedes and AC, not such a big deal. It doesn't get hot in Sweden, just like the older German cars. Their AC systems suck, but this is still blowing cold. Of course, we harken back to an older day. Look, there's nothing on the steering wheel but a horn. Not a million buttons and all that crap. Everything's simple. The fan, the heat, you turn it by yourself. Right? He added the JVC stereo. The armrest, yeah, they all kind of fall apart when they get old, but it's still there. And it may be an old car, but it's cold in Sweden. And look, the heated seats still work. It even has a sunroof. They don't have a garage, so you can see The old paint's fading away. The clear coat's gone, some of the paint's gone, but still solid, hasn't rusted. We're talking 30 plus years. These rims are still in good shape. I saw a Chevy last week's 5 years old. The rims are shot already. They're all pitting and falling apart. Again, they don't make them like they used to. Now, a lot of people are going to think, oh, but an old car, how are you going to get parts for it? Hey, they sold so many of this design. You can still get parts all over the place for these vehicles, and you don't need parts all that often because they're pretty well made. Now look, most of the parts here you can see, they're still original equipment. He had the AC worked on, you can see the water pump been changed at times, but I mean, that kind of stuff goes. Alternator's been replaced once with a Bosch ream hand. You want to get a ream hand, get a Bosch. They're the best ones out there. Let's take it for a spin. No backup camera, so we'll use our head. The thing is though, this thing feels like a normal Volvo. They are what you could call stable shooting platforms. They are just solid, safe machines. That was one of the big things for Volvos. Extremely safe cars. Yeah, they were the first ones to really do airbags. You get in an old thing like this, it may be old, but I'll tell you what, I feel safe. I don't feel like I'm in a little tin can that something's gonna hit it and it's all over with. Then, as we take the turns here, hey, still handles perfectly fine. It's a station wagon, yeah. 300,000 plus miles. All right, what do I hear? Nothing. I don't hear wheel bearings. I don't hear transmission bearings. I don't hear engine bearings. These things are made. These are the type of Volvos that actually can go over 1 million miles if you took care of them. You're driving around here. Brakes and everything works fine. Really, for such an old car, it's pretty quiet. And I'm amazed the plastic isn't all cracked. Usually the plastic's all cracked, but this baby lives outside and it's not cracked. We'll get to our little drag strip up here and we'll see what this turbo does. These are stable, safe vehicles. Of course, on the other hand, that makes them heavy. That's why they get 20 miles a gallon. Because they're heavy, safe vehicles. These are not lightweight vehicles, as we'll probably find out. There's nobody behind us, so we can take off. It's not going to go out like a rocket, I can tell you that. Here we go. And we're starting off. It's going. Now, not a race car, but you can see they rebuilt the tranny good. That shift's good. And the engine is just purring along. Hey, it's got 323,000 miles, and it's still pretty close to perfect. Now, unfortunately, I can't hook up my fancy scan tool because it's too old. It wasn't until 3 years after this car was made that they had OBD2, where I could tell you all kinds of technology about it. This doesn't have that capability whatsoever, but in most cases, it really didn't need them because they very rarely broke down. The Swedes that put them together in Sweden, they did a good job and they just tended to last. Oh look, the visor's broken. Oh well, this one isn't though. This is the one you care about. The one that's over the driver's head. It'd be a 4-cylinder engine, but hey, it idles pretty smooth. And again, not a race vehicle, but hey, you cruise all day at 80 miles an hour. They were really well-designed vehicles. And people love the space in these. But of course, everyone into the SUV craze, and they all know what SUVs are crossovers, whatever the heck they want to call a crossover. These station wagons served the same purpose for decades. 3 years ago, he put the seats down and he camped in when he went cross country. They are long. There is a lot of space in these things. So here we go. Take a little corners. The corners fine. I'm not worried about the wheels falling off. This is still a very reliable station wagon, even with 323,000 miles on it. And sure, with that kind of mileage, it burns a little bit of oil. He might have to put in 2 or 3 quarts in between oil changes, maybe every 1,000 miles or something, but hey, it's got 323,000 miles. It doesn't smoke out the back. It's just old age. Any engine with that kind of mileage is going to burn some kind of oil unless it was perfectly made. So there we have it. Smooth running even when it's sitting in park. He paid $1,500 for it 18 years ago. Put 200,000 miles on it. The only big money was he had to have the transmission rebuilt 20,000 miles ago. When it had 300,000 miles, that only cost him $2 grand. And here it stands. Still runs great. Unfortunately, Volvo doesn't make them like this anymore. And since the Chinese took over, they claim they're going to make electrics and hybrid electric cars in the future. Who knows what'll come of that? People aren't buying the electric cars. Maybe Volvo should have stuck to their guns and built cars reliable as this. They were known as reliable, safe cars forever. And now as they've got more European snooty cars, even though the Chinese own them, maybe they took the wrong direction. They should have kept making these solid tanks that go down the road forever, and they'd be selling a lot more of them if you ask me. But I mean, what do I know? I just fix them. Okay, here we have a blast from the past. A 91 Toyota pickup. People just bought it for 2,500 bucks. I'm going to show you how to check them out, how not to listen to what people tell you, and you'll see this is actually a very good truck, even though it's old. And of course, as I always say, don't listen to anything somebody tells you about a vehicle that they're selling to you, because they told them that, oh, it just had a clutch put in. Well, they drove it from Knoxville to here, which is like 360. They got 300. The last 60 were told because the clutch broke, because it was so old it just completely fell apart. It's got a new clutch in it now and it works perfectly fine. But don't believe what people say. I get a lot of guys, oh, it's got a new engine, and I look at it like, doesn't look like a new engine to me. People just make up stories. You can't see the inside of a clutch till you pull the transmission off, so don't listen to what people have to say. Let's say you look at one of these and the clutch slips. You're in first gear and it slips a lot. Then you know, well, the clutch is worn out, and you knock off the price of a clutch on the asking price of the vehicle. In this case, it worked okay until it just broke because it was so old. It just physically came apart. 91, I had a 91 Toyota Corolla SR5. That thing ran forever. It was white too. And as you can see, made in Japan. The best ones are made in Japan. And this one, of course, is a 5-speed standard transmission, which is even better. Mine was a 5-speed, same transmission as this, SR5. Thing ran forever. You gotta put a clutch in every once in a while. Big deal. It's not like an automatic transmission that not only will you spend thousands to fix it, but half the time they don't even fix it right. These are pretty bulletproof. Just the clutches wear out. Now when we look under the hood, you'll see the 4-cylinder engine. Okay? This is a 22 series. These engines are basically bulletproof. They can run forever. They do have a fuel injection system. It's the old school mass airflow sensor with a big vein that moves inside here. But as you can see, even though this thing is a 91, most of the parts are still original. I mean, I can see even the AC compressor is original. It is original. Toyota knew how to build these. Look, the master cylinder's rusty, but it's still the original one, and it still stops. Seats are falling apart. I mean, that's what happens. Get some good seat covers. They make tons of them. And for those of you that don't know what this is called a window crank. It cranks your window up and down. It doesn't have electric windows. And guess what? These things don't break. Power up. Typical Toyota starts on the first start. Speedometer, temperature gauge, fuel gauge. All you really need. And of course, they put a Pioneer aftermarket stereo because the ones in them were crap. But hey, that's a decent stereo. It's got a decent sized glove box. Look, it even has the original owner's manual. Check it out. It even came with this nice cap. They got a cap on it. And there's the old worn out clutch parts that they say were new. You can see they're not new at all. For a vehicle like this that's going to last forever, it's not a bad idea to throw a clutch in after you buy it anyways. Then you don't have to think about anything. And you can see the original steel wheels are still in good shape. Hey, they don't sound like that anymore. They don't make them as thick. Now sure, it's got a little ticking noise. An old engine like this is going to make a little bit of noise. You're just going to hear little valve noises here and there. Everything gets worn out. It's this old. As long as it's running good, not burning much oil, you're gonna be happy with one of these. You don't have to worry about airbags blowing up in your face. They don't have airbags, but they got seat belts. Now these aren't racing machines by any stretch of the imagination. They'll go up and down the road virtually forever. And this thing only has 255,000 miles on it. I've seen these with 500 and they're still going. Sounds good. Shifts fine. Now that it has a new clutch in it. They drove it to me in Clarksville from Knoxville, 360 miles, going 95 miles an hour. And it still went until the clutch broke. It'll make it back fine now because it has a new clutch. Like I said, the guy just lied to him and said, oh, it just had a clutch put in. He absolutely lied. The old one was just junk. Just came apart. As the engine revs higher, you don't hear any kind of horrible noises. That's just a little bit of valve ticking. And if it was really bad, it would tick when you really gassed it, and it doesn't. It actually quiets down then. Sure, it's not going to race going up hills, but I mean, it gets you where you go. It's an old pickup truck that might run another 20, 30 years. Oh, as you can see, it runs perfectly fine. Got the windows open for some air. It's just a nice, dependable little work truck. Hey, the horn still blows. Turn signals work, headlights work, and it goes down the road. And even with 255,000 miles on it, the wheel bearings are still solid. They're not humming. The steering's still good. Now, it doesn't have power steering, but it really isn't that hard to steer. Even parking and parallel parking isn't all that hard. So there you have it, 2,500 bucks for a truck that still runs. I wouldn't be surprised if it was running 20 years from now. It's in Tennessee now. It's not going to rust out or anything. Hey, it's So a decent deal. Sure, they got lied to about the clutch, but what the heck. Now it's got a new clutch. It can go a long time without having to think about anything at all. And hey, it still looks pretty good. It's not bashed in, it's clean. A nice truck for 2,500 bucks. Okay, here's a Ford Explorer. Guy bought it used with 100,000 miles. This is a relatively good one. It was made in the United States. It's got a #1 VIN. How popular are these things? Well, Ford sold over 8 million of them, so to tell you they're popular. Now, luckily, this is a guy who likes to do his own work. Here's the work that he's done. A lot of work. He's done it all himself, except for the ABS brake module. He had to pay a mechanic to do it and reprogram. That cost him $1,000 bucks. So it keeps him busy. He's like me. He wants to be doing something. So he got the right vehicle if he wants to do something. Now he's maintained it right. He's done all the fluids and everything. Done it right. And he said the pistons work, so he says it's not going to hit me in the head, so if it hits me in the head, this is proof. They're very good engines. They're 4-liter V6 engines. And this one, since it's a little bit older, it's the same as the Ford Edge behind me. It's a V6, but it's not EcoBoost. It doesn't have turbocharging. It doesn't have GDI injectors. As such, these engines can basically last forever if you change the oil regularly. Baby's got 180,000 miles. Doesn't burn any oil. Before they started getting this EPA, we got to get better gas mileage nonsense, they built things that were solid, had plenty of power, didn't burn oil, and lasted a long time. You throw twin turbos and GDI injection that's over sometimes 1,000 pounds per square inch pressure, it just wears the engines out. The turbos wear. They cost a lot of money. This doesn't have any of that crap on it. That's what really made these things go. And my all-time favorite, never see that many of them, is they made a few of these with V8 engines. And man, they were screamers. Now they get a lot worse gas mileage with that big old V8 engine, but you can pull more. So if you really wanted a powerhouse, you get a V8. Like I said, they're pretty hard to find though. Almost all of them have these 6s, and they got plenty of power in them. And Ford has improved their AC from decades ago. His AC still works perfectly fine. You know, it's got 180,000 miles. These are the epitome of the Explorers. When they started to go to that EcoBoost stuff, they're not going to last as long. Yeah, they got more power, they get a little bit better gas mileage. They're not going to hold up like these. When they're 20, 30 years old, you're not going to see too many of those EcoBoosts still going down the road unless people spend a small fortune. He maintains this thing and he does it himself, other than the ABS system that the modulator went back, because you got to reprogram and you got to have a computer like I have to bleed the air out of them. It's a pain in the butt, and that cost him $1,000 bucks. But everything else he's done himself: brakes, fluids, and it is an all-wheel drive system, so he's taking care of it right. The wheel wells aren't rotted out. And the undercarriage is in good shape. Hey, look at that, solid, no rust, no anything. Bought it in Florida. A lot of people on the East Coast, man, they got on foot and they buy cars. There's even people that do it for a living. As long as you find a car that wasn't driven by a beach bum. Because if he's driving it on that salt water, let me tell you, back in Texas, the people that lived on the water at Galveston, it ate their Fords up like no tomorrow. But in Houston, if you just drove and parked on the street and walked to the beach, your car's not going to rust. But if you live on the beach, salt water, salt air, eats them up. If it has no rust on it, believe me, people are looking for these things. As the owner just warned me, there's hundreds of thousands of flood cars for sale in Florida. You don't want to buy those. So you want to see what date, see if it's been flooded, see if an insurance claim was made on the thing. Now, I don't know what they're doing in Florida, but when we had Hurricane Harvey in Houston, a lot of the insurance companies sent their car to this abandoned racetrack, and the insurance companies just put flood on the ones after they looked at them, and they were forced to destroy them. They would not let them retitle them in Texas to be sold to anybody. But be real leery, because there's a lot of states that wash titles, like South Carolina. A lot of people, they'll buy a car like that, they'll retitle in South Carolina, then you're buying a used car and you think, oh, it's South Carolina. See when the South Carolina title was done. Because if it was done after the flood, it could be a Florida flood car, and you're buying it even though it says South Carolina. No, he hasn't had any problem with the all-wheel drive system, and of course, since it's in Florida, unless he's planning on going in the swamps, you really don't need all-wheel drive. So Ford certainly did something right, selling 8 million of these things. It's got the cloth seats, which hold up better, and it is an SUV, so you got a lot of space in one of these things. Big enough trunk, and then even more when you fold them down. And that's why the Edge is seen as a compact vehicle and not an SUV, because you can see the back's quite a bit smaller. Although it's larger than they used to be. Come with a big auto scanner, it just plugs in. Now this is black on black. You can't see it, but I figured out where it was. This is older, it has a key. My favorite. Tire monitor fault, but that's because he took them all out of the tires. He tried to get one of these English devices that gets rid of it, but unfortunately they don't make it for this particular model, so he lives with that. Now we'll do diagnostics. That was fast, man. Look how fast that popped up. It's Ford, it's not Ford EU. Read the VIN really fast. 4-liter automatic gasoline. Loading everything up. So we'll do a fault scan. And we're off to the races. Here we go. It's an older Ford, so you know, it'll be electrical weird stuff. It's got code for battery voltage is low. Well, you know, if you ever have it changed, you don't reset it, you'll have all these codes. Look at this. The ignition was switched on without any key code being read. Well, I don't care about that. Less than 2 transmitters programmed. Tire sensor fault. Well, he knew that. Well, it's lying to us because there's one here and there's an old one in the armrest, so that is crazy. But everything else you can see, there's no problems at all. So for those crazy ones, we'll just erase them. You want to erase these because it thinks that the transmitters aren't programmed right, and the tire sensor fault is permanent because there's no sensors in the tires anymore, and it knows that. So what we're going to do is go to the powertrain control module. We're going to start it up, and we're going to look at live data. There she blows, live data. See, it's going to get a lot of live data because it's taking a while just to communicate to the live data. Let's start checking through this live data. Air conditioning, clutch, air fuel trim. Now check this out. The airflow trim learned is minus 0.02. And this is minus 0.1. Over 99% efficiency. You can't complain. We'll go on analyzing stuff. Brake voltage is good. Battery voltage is good. The transmission data is good. Even shows you the evap system. No engine misfires. Only in the E's. There's a lot more to go here. Shows you the fuel rail pressure. And this is a Ford, so the modern one show you the percentage that's being used. Presently it's 22.79%. So we go on, we're in the H's now. You can see all the injectors, 6 of them, no faults in any of them. Long-term fuel term, it's minus 0.78 or minus 0.39, practically nothing. It's almost perfect. That's less than 1% off. And it even goes all the way to show you the cooling fan speed sensor for the Vistronic cooling fan. Relatively complicated. Let's take it for a spin. So it's old, no backup camera, we gotta look out. And it's an all-wheel drive, so we can go over these bumps real easy, no problems at all. And sure, he tried to take that out. He's got a piece of tape over the other one. Maybe he'll put a piece of tape there too. And really, as old as it is with 180,000 miles, it's still riding over the bumps on these horrid Rhode Island roads quite well. So we'll take her out on the road here. Once everybody gets out of the way, they're coming from everywhere. Here we go. Give it some gas. Hey, that 6-cylinder still goes, and the tranny still ships like a dream. Hey, you can see he's added his own little backup camera, and he's added a center for electronics too to modernize it. Idle, smooth as silk. No shaking at all. You know, it's high up in the air. Hey, this thing is amazing. But just remember, this was a Florida car. You're gonna buy one of these used, you better look for rust. This thing has none. If it was a northern car, I can guarantee you, the undercarriage would be all rotted away and the fenders would have holes in them. Now, the only downside is really the gas mileage. But, on the other hand, he drove it here 80 miles an hour and he got 22.6 miles a gallon. For something this big, it's all-wheel drive. So, that's not bad. That's real gas mileage at 80 miles an hour. That's not some fantasy EPA rating. It is the real rating. For example, I had a brand new Lexus I was trying out a few years ago. It was rated at 35 miles a gallon. I drove it from San Antonio, Texas to Houston, 80 miles an hour, and it got about 24 miles a gallon. It was rated at 35, but it only got 24, and this is real, so it's not all that bad. The way it's held up, less technology, doesn't have all the complex turbos, all of that stuff on it. You can find one of these Florida babies that isn't rusted out. Hey, my advice is snap it up, even if you really don't want one. You could always sell it on to somebody else and make a profit, or keep it as a second car to go wherever you want to go. So if you never want to miss another one of my new car repair videos, remember to ring that bell.